Module 5, Data Quality. This session will concentrate on issues that have a negative impact on the quality and usefulness of road safety data. This includes missing or incomplete data, errors in data entry and interpretation, differences in variable definitions, and underreporting. The speaker will also discuss the impact of these issues. Effective techniques to address data quality issues will be discussed with examples that can be applied. Dr. Turner will start Module 5.
These ones are very important as well. Data quality, many of you have already discussed as a major issue in your countries. But firstly, data quality. What we're going to do is talk about some of the issues that have an impact on data quality. What makes our data so it's not so good? And that's including things like we have missing information or incomplete data. There's errors sometimes in the data entry. Also, there's sometimes errors in the interpretation or the understanding of the process or of the data as well. Differences in the variable definitions, and I'll explain some of those to you shortly. We don't collect all of the data. Sometimes we don't even know what we're missing. So I'll discuss that as well. Firstly, I'll talk about the problems, and then I'll move on to some of the solutions. How do we actually improve the situation? It may be a problem that will take many years for us to fix, but we need to make a start. But also we need to understand that this is a problem. If we know that there is missing information, then we can perhaps plan a little bit better as well. So firstly, missing or incomplete data. There's many people involved in the data collection and data entry process, and there's a lot of different steps in that process, and at each of those steps, things can go wrong. Sometimes people can go out to record information, so maybe the police, maybe others, and it may be incorrect, the information that they have recorded. They may say that there were 3 people involved in the crash, but there are actually 4. One person's driven away already. There may be things that they weren't aware of that have happened. There may be errors when they fill the form in. They may write something down in the wrong box, wrong information. Similarly, when the information comes to be entered into the data system, it's not always the police that does this task. It may be some data entry staff, and they may not be able to understand what the police have written. It may be that they cannot convert the information into the right information to go inside the database. Sometimes, and usually, the errors are unintentional and the result of human error. If you're receiving hundreds of different police reports in one day, busy trying to put this information into the system, it is easy to make errors. We expect errors. All people make errors. The police cannot always attend the crash. Sometimes they'll fill in the form at the police station. Someone may say to them, there has been a crash here. Come and tell them some details, but they aren't there to identify all of the issues. They won't know, was this at an intersection? They won't know other issues about the people involved. They won't be able to draw a diagram, as we discussed. So that's the crash data. We also have issues, though, with missing and incomplete data for our non-crash information. So our road inventory, our road asset information. Errors can happen there as well. And this is about collecting information from video and basically putting this information into a database. Sometimes errors can happen there. Similarly, things like analysis of speed data. If we do a speed survey with our laser gun on the side of the road, we're hiding behind the tree just to get information, but we can enter this information into our spreadsheet. It could be incorrect. So there's many ways we can make errors, and we have to expect that these might happen. The second problem type is differences in the definitions. One of the major issues, for instance, is in how we define fatal crashes, and I'll explain some issues in a moment about that. The different variables that we collect from our crash data can differ between different data sources, so between the police data and the hospital data. Definitions can be different. People may have been trained in one place differently to somewhere else. They may say that this crash was an intersection crash over in this area, but if it was the same in another area, they have a different idea. They say it's not an intersection crash. The other issue is that when we try to compare our information, especially in the Asia region, between our neighbours, we had this discussion yesterday, It is sometimes hard to compare because the definitions are different in each of these countries. So issues can happen with individual data items when we compare data sets, and the quality within that data set can vary. Some of the major issues, the common issues that we have for definitions relate to the road crash, the injury severity, and the location. So I'll explain each of these to you now. What do we include as a road crash? One of the issues we often have is we either include or decide not to exclude crashes involving non-motorised vehicles. So do we include pedestrians? Well, yes, we would like to if they involve vehicles. Do we include bicycles? Yes, we would like to. But there are other sorts of vehicles as well. Sometimes maybe little scooters, children on scooters. If they are on a scooter, scooting along the footpath and run into a tree, is this counted as a road injury? These are all questions that you'll need to decide and make definitions for yourself. Because if you leave it to other people who are entering data, they need to have a decision made already. As I said, sometimes we include information from private roadways or from parks or car parks. Sometimes this is included, sometimes this is not included. So you need to decide, do you want to include this or not? And you need to give this information and train people exactly what you mean by a traffic crash. The last one there is about certain medical conditions. There's a situation where someone is on a motorcycle, maybe elderly, and have a heart attack, have an accident, seriously injured from the accident. Do you count this as a road traffic injury, or was it the heart attack was the problem, or some other medical condition? We also have an issue, I don't know about in Asia, but in Australia, sometimes people suicide, don't want to live anymore, they'll drive a car very fast into a tree. This is a problem for some of our crashes. In Australia, we don't say that they are traffic crashes, we say that they are medical suicide, different. Very, very hard for us to tell, to understand, to know if this was someone trying to kill themselves on purpose or whether this was a traffic crash. Okay, so we need to be clear on these definitions. And we need to train people and let people know to understand what are we going to include and what will we not include in our definitions. This can have a big, big difference. This one about suicide is very, very interesting because in our countries now, for Australia, for instance, we are making good progress. Each year we want to say we're below this number. We want to be below 300 people dying on our roads now, or below 250. And so there's a lot of work done to understand, was this really a traffic crash, or was this medical, or was this suicide, or something different? So for us it becomes more and more important. Definitions for severity is another major issue. Fatal crashes, detailed definition about what should be included as a fatal crash. And the international standard, I think most of you will probably understand this, is a fatal injury crash relates to the 30-day rule. So when a crash occurs, when any person is killed immediately or dies within 30 days as a result of that road crash injury. Now, this is easy to say. This is something that we want to collect information on, but this is very hard. The police, how do they know that someone has died 20 days later, 25 days later? This is very difficult for us. They will know if someone dies the same at the crash. This is easier. But they may not even know for 1 day later. So this is a problem in many countries. In the more advanced countries, what we do is we follow up with the hospitals. We know if someone dies, they must send a note from traffic crash. They'll send maybe a fax to say this person has died within 30 days. And so we can have accurate information about this. If your country, you don't do this and you want to compare your numbers with other countries around the world, the WHO has produced this table. This is the adjustments. For people who use the 30-day rule, this is the number here. 30 days, you have all of crashes, 100%, equal to what other countries do. If you only have information at the scene, at the crash location, the research that they have done tells us you will only have 3/4 of the crashes, 77%. So if you were saying that your number of fatal crashes, location is 100, but you only collect on the day of the crash happening, it is likely there will be more people who die later in hospital. Okay? This table is very useful. If you want to compare your crashes to other countries, if you know what they use in terms of their collection, this will help you convert to understand. As I've said, coordination is needed between the police who attend the crash and hospital staff to check after 30 days and ask, did this person survive or did they die? So this is a process that you need to have in place. The other issue about definitions is for the definition for a serious crash. And remember, we spoke about this yesterday. There was an international standard for defining serious injury, this MAIS 3+. Remember, 9 parts of the body. If any one part of the body is seriously injured, then that is counted as a 3+. And that is now what the Europeans are doing. But in this part of the world, we don't do this yet. This is what we would like to aim towards. Okay, so the other category of injury is those people that have got a minor injury. You might have a bruise or bleeding, a cut. The other information that is sometimes collected, but not always, is property damage only. No injuries at all, but there was damage done to a car, so a crash has happened. Now sometimes this could be just purely by luck, good fortune that there was no injury. So that makes it a good reason to try and collect this information as well. But also it does give us information about locations where crashes may happen that are more serious in future. But again, this is expensive. It's extra information to collect. It is not our priority. For our countries in Asia, our priority is fatal. Our priority is serious. We can start collecting slight and minor, but we shouldn't spend money on this just yet. We should spend our money on this just now. If it is easy for us to collect this information, then we should try to start doing that. And as a long-term goal, perhaps in future we can collect this as well. Okay? This is not as useful. This is the most useful. Okay? Do you understand that? So the more we collect, the more it will cost us. We need to get our priorities right, collect our more serious information first. Location. Very important for many of our end users. We saw those maps before. There is no way you can create a map unless you know the location of the crash. We saw how useful this information was for the police, how useful it was to improve the road through road safety engineers. Many other people want this information as well. This is a problem in many countries to get this so it is accurate. There are a number of ways we can do this, and there are new technologies that help us too. The best way, GPS. So now in many police vehicles, they have the equipment to understand where they are, and they can write down the latitude and longitude coordinates. Or sometimes they have handheld devices where they can tell when they're at the crash location the latitude and longitude coordinates. And this needs to go into the database. There is a problem though. I have seen this before where sometimes the police forget. They go to the crash, take some details down, then drive back to the police station and sit there and fill in the rest of the form. And I've seen examples where the police push the button for GPS and it brings up the location, police station. And when you map all of their crashes are happening at the police station. So this is not right, this is wrong information. So that's the most important way to do this, is a GPS device. Very, very useful. Identify locations is called the link node system, number 2. In this case, we say, if we know the street name, we say the crash happened on this street, and we say it was this far away from the nearest major feature. So maybe it happened on ADB Avenue, and it happened outside entrance to ADB. Or we say it was 100 metres north of ADB entranceway, or it was with the intersection of the other roads which come off ADB Avenue. This is also very useful, and if the police can write this down, maybe the analysts can look at their map and get the GPS coordinates as well later. This is one of the most common ways we do locations for crashes. The last method that is used, and again quite common, is called the linear referencing system. These markers here, you may use these in your countries as well. On any highway, we have 0. The road starts here. and then maybe at 100 metres we have a little marker, or maybe at 500 metres a marker, and it tells us we are now 500 metres along the road. And so when the police attend the crash, especially on a country road, rural road, they can drive past a marker and then they can measure using their car how far from that marker the crash has happened. This is very useful on rural roads because often there are no intersections or no major features to use the link node system. But there is one major issue that we've seen in many countries. Sometimes we have referencing posts that are this big, made from concrete, big markers. There's a problem with this. This is a roadside hazard. If a car drives off the road and hits this will make an accident problem. Okay, so small and not so dangerous is better. Okay, a big problem, underreporting. This is a problem in every country in the world. Every country has this problem. In Asia, the problem is maybe bigger, but every country has the same issues. The WHO produced the Global Status Report in 2013, and this has got information from every country in the world about their crash numbers. It tells the official number for a country. It says, in this country there were officially 1,000 crashes. But there is also a complicated analysis that has been undertaken by the WHO, and they've estimated what they think the real number of crashes is. And they may say, really, we think 3,000, not 1,000, 3,000. And so from that report, we can tell very easily the underreporting rates for different countries. In many countries around the world, including in this region, we only get 15 to 20% of actual deaths. So we may say there is 1,000 deaths, but really there are 5,000. This is a major problem. I think you all know this is a major problem. One country, I won't say which country it was, officially report only 2.5% of all fatal crashes. They say in their country there were maybe 25 crashes, but really there were a lot more, 1,000 crashes. So completely wrong. It happens at many different stages. The URTAD group again, who we spoke about yesterday, have some information about the police data collection. So they say these same things. The police may not be informed when a crash occurs. They don't always go to the location. They may not formally prepare a crash form. They may not have the right training, expertise, interest or time. They may not record all the relevant details, or they may record incorrect information. Again, it may not be entered into the database, or it may be lost in the transfer process. So all these different stages. That's for crash data, but also for non-crash data as well, hospital data. Sometimes the hospital data system doesn't cover all of the population. Sometimes there are areas missing, and so there's underreporting for hospitals as well at national level. We mentioned the injury surveillance systems that are available in some countries. Sometimes the cause of the death, of the injury or death isn't actually given as transport related. Maybe they say it's another cause. Sometimes there is missing information, missing death certificates. So when we come to talk about comparison between police data and hospital data, there are errors in both. There's no point arguing about which is best. We need to say that there are errors in both, and we try to use the best from both systems together. Underreporting can vary for different reasons. We know that we get more information on fatal crashes, less on serious crashes, and not very much on minor injury only. So by severity, it differs. It can vary by transport mode. We find that we get less information in our country, for instance, about pedestrian crashes and motorcycle crashes, more about car crashes. And the reason for this is because when there's a car crash, often there is traffic jam, traffic congestion. And so the police come in that situation. So it's more important to them to go to those situations and they collect the data. But if it was a pedestrian, maybe the pedestrian can be carried off the road and people can keep driving and police will never come. So by different transport modes, car, motorcycle, pedestrian, bicycle, truck, it can be different. And we may say our biggest problem is cars, but really our biggest problem might be motorcycles. This is important to know. So transport mode and road user type, so that's pedestrians. It can vary also by victim age. Sometimes we miss some people, maybe younger people are missed because they aren't as badly injured. They walk off the road and walk home, but later we understand they are seriously injured. Whereas an elderly person, same impact, they may have a more serious consequence. They're more elderly and more inclined for injury. Crash location. We usually record more crashes in our cities and sometimes on our major roads out of cities, but less so away in our regional areas, our rural roads. We have less information because often the police are not around. We do not collect this information. So it may say our biggest problem is the city, but we're missing much more information for outside the city. So be aware of this. There is differences between locations. Some common findings we see from issues for underreporting. Crashes involving one vehicle only are less likely to be reported than crashes involving two or more vehicles. And that's often because when there's two vehicles involved, again, busy traffic, cars have to stop, police have to come. If it's just one vehicle running off the road, the cars can still keep going. But also, if one vehicle only is involved, people aren't complaining. It's the driver who has run off the road, maybe. There's no fighting, they're not arguing about who caused the crash. So when there's arguing, they want the police to come to solve the problem. So we have underreporting for crashes that involve driving off the road for one vehicle only, as an example. I've mentioned already we have reporting differences for different hospital types. Rural hospitals and private hospitals, they may record more or less than other types of hospitals. I've already said the higher the injury severity, the higher the reporting rate. We get more fatals and we get less minor injuries. And again, this one about the older victims. Elderly people, if they are involved in an injury, at lower speeds can have broken hips, other serious injuries, whereas children may get up and walk away and not be seriously injured. So we have higher reporting for older victims. Before I come on to some solutions, the issue about underreporting can give unintended consequences. And for those in Indonesia, you may recognise this graph here. This is a case study that is used in the Data Systems Manual. We will also use this case study in the World Road Association Road Safety Manual as well. This shows that attempts were made in 2009 to improve data collection. And at that stage, there was a combining of police data with insurance and hospital data, bringing these different sources of information together. So in 2009, what happened? Big increase. Everyone said, oh no, there's been big increases in crashes. Our problem suddenly got worse. But this is only because there's been a better system in place. So you need to expect that this will happen. And I know there's been some discussion already about this problem, that it'll be bad for people if crashes look like they are increasing. But again, it is worse if we don't understand the real problem. We can't allocate resources. We can't make a case to government to say more funding for road safety. We need to go through this process to have this jump, and then we have the data that is better, and we can then start to make more improvements for road safety. So this caused an apparent increase, not a real increase. Okay, so an improvement in the recording of the existing deaths, not an increase in crashes. So what we do is we compare different databases to help understand the true number of crashes. The most common comparison that we make is between police crash data and the hospital data. This is not an easy task. If you remember, each database will have different types of information. How will we match the data from police with the data from hospitals? Sometimes we have a code that is the same. This would be the best thing to have, but it's not often happening. What we can do, though, is we can look at the date of crashes. We know that these crashes happened on the 23rd of June 2014. That gives us a good start. We can say that these are the same crashes. But then we know maybe the time of day or the age of the person involved, male or female. So we can use these different bits of information to see if this is the same crash in this database or that database. It is very difficult to match data. And we know, as I've said before, that there is underreporting from police data, but there is also issues with hospital data. Sometimes there is underreporting, but sometimes there is also overreporting. Sometimes hospitals say, this was a transport crash. But remember, we maybe have different definition for accidents. We're not interested so much in a farmer in his field who has been involved in a transport, maybe tractor accident. We're interested in the roads. So therefore, maybe there are more crashes in hospital database because of different definitions. So this creates problems for us. Hospital data and compare with police crash data. If we do this linking task by date and by person, we can see quite often, yes, they're in both. Sometimes there is information, though, that is not in the police database, only available from hospital data. So we can say these are additional crashes. We have the police data, and we have additional data for hospital. Add these things together, this will give us our total information. Also, sometimes we have information available from the police, but maybe not in hospital data. Okay, so again, we need to understand these linkages between the data. Make sure we're not counting the same person twice. Maybe hospital data, we think it's one person, and then police data, we think it's a different person. So we need to have a system in place to assess this data quality issue. So again, there is information in the data systems manual that explains the steps that we do for that. Okay, so what do we do to help improve data quality? Some of the main steps. Again, I mentioned this issue about the definitions for variables. We need to do a review of our variables for those very important issues. Ensure that our definitions are easy to understand and that everyone who is involved in the data process uses the same definitions, particularly for severity. Make sure they understand the definition for fatal and for serious. Make sure they understand some of the other important variables from that essential list of items you saw yesterday. So training is probably a solution here. We need to train police. We need to train people who enter data into the systems. We need to reinforce the need to report crashes. There are a number of ways we can do that. Sometimes we can make it a legal requirement. We say if a crash happens, you must report to the police. And sometimes this is linked to insurance. You cannot claim insurance unless you've already reported to the police. And this is a way to help increase the number of people who do report involvement in crashes. We can also improve the tools. Remember, we spoke yesterday about the police report form. If it's too complex, we'll have less people who want to fill this form in. If we have an electronic form as part of the police vehicle, it'll be easier to complete this form, and so reporting will be better. Maybe a handheld device. Again, this makes it easier. If we can't do this, if we have just a paper device, paper form, make it easy. Maybe it is a major task for you when you go back to your countries to look again at your police forms and to see, do we need all of these items? From our stakeholder analysis and our needs assessments, do we use all this information? Perhaps we can stop collecting and make it easier for the police. And also we can make it, maybe they can tick the boxes easier, quicker. We want to make this process as easy and as quick as possible to maximize, to increase the numbers. Similarly, when we code information, there's errors that might happen, or it may be too long or take too much time or be too hard to enter information into the crash database. We want to make the process as easy as possible. So maybe we can have a system, some systems do this. We tick the box on the form and then we have a scan through the computer and automatically it enters information into the database. It's one option to look at. The other issue we spoke about was the location issue. We need to collect accurate information on locations. So we can use GPS, and that may be a major project for you to talk to ADB about. Maybe you need this equipment in your vehicles. Training. Training is important for everyone involved in the data collection and data entry process. Talk to the police, conduct training with the police about what they are needing to do and about why they need to do it. I think all of you have to do paperwork in your jobs. You have to write forms, you have to write reports. And this is a boring part of your job. Filling in forms is not exciting. But if we know that what we're doing is important, then we think, well, we must do this. This is important. we will keep doing this. But if people don't understand why they're filling the forms in, why so much detail is needed, they won't want to do this. Okay, so that's part of the training. The last thing we can do is we can put in place data quality assurance measures. We can have experts check afterwards. So the police, we can have expert police check to make sure that this is a good police form, it's all been filled in. Similarly, data entry, we may have the team leader check, not every single one, maybe check 1 in every 100, maybe more. But we need to have a process in place to do checking, to make sure people understand, to make sure people are entering the information into the system. This is what I think is one of the most effective ways to improve data quality in terms of the reporting rates. That is to be working closely in partnership with the police to make sure that they understand that their job is so important. What they are doing is the basic foundation for all road safety activity. We can do this by showing them maps. Again, print off a map, go to the police station and show them how we use this information. Show them that what they are doing is very important and work with the police to help them, and they'll be able to help you as well. Okay, so we're able to print these maps off now with our systems. We can go and put it on the wall for a police station. Someone in one of your police stations may do what happened to me. They may say, well, this is missing one crash here. I went there 2 weeks ago. And you can say to them, check in your top drawer for your report and put that into the system.